Dr. Heather Moore, owner of Total Performance Physical Therapy. Today we're going to answer the question, is walking barefoot bad for you? So we can say yes and no, and we'll get into why that is. When you are walking barefoot, your foot has no support, which in turn means your ankle has no support, your knee has no support. So when you walk without any shoes on, you actually are absorbing all of the forces that are put through your foot. So every time your foot strikes the ground, there's an amount of force that happens that your hip, knee, ankle, foot has to absorb all of that force. When you wear a pair of shoes, the shoes are designed, for the most part, to absorb that force. Now, things like a high heel or a really low flat shoe, that are more of a ballet flat, don't absorb a lot of that force. But a very well-built sneaker will. So when you're walking barefoot, if you are suffering with any type of lower extremity pain or back pain, it actually could make everything worse. It is something that you don't want to make a habit of because of the fact that your joints have to absorb all of the force. So if you're walking around the house barefoot, great. But if you're going on extended walks, you really want to be careful of that, because anytime your foot hits the ground, there are forces involved. And that force will go all the way up the chain, even though you don't feel it. Like I'm certain you don't hit the ground every time and feel the pain in your back unless you're suffering with low back pain. But it goes all the way up into your back and has to absorb that. Now, most times a sneaker will also absorb that. So it's not a very good habit to get into if you are dealing with low back, hip pain, any type of lower extremity pain. You also want to be careful when you're walking barefoot because of how you walk. When you're walking in a shoe and you walk and your heel hits the ground and you go through and you push off on your toes, there is a certain motion that your foot makes as it goes through that progression. When you have a shoe on, especially like a good sneaker, that sneaker can help control the motion from when your foot hits the ground to your toes. However, when you have no shoes on, you have zero way of controlling that. So if you're someone with a flat foot, you likely what we call overpromenade. And that's just more of a sandwich walking on the ground. And if you have a good pair of shoes, it's going to help you keep that foot in what we call neutral. And when you hit the ground, your foot's going to be able to be in neutral. If you overpronate, if you have that flatter foot, what happens is when your foot hits the ground, your ankle goes in, your knee goes in, and your hip goes in. Very gross exaggeration of exactly what happens, but this is the mechanism of what you're dealing with every time you step and you don't have shoes on. Now, if you're a high arch person, you're kind of dealing with the opposite. Sometimes you can be putting some stress more on the outside, and every time you take a step, all of it goes on the outside and the pressure goes all the way out here. So it can, that repetitive motion of just collapsing in or collapsing out can create joint problems. So it's not something that, again, you're going to feel right away, but that long-term use of running or walking barefoot can be very detrimental, especially if your foot mechanics are not optimal, which most of ours aren't. Most of ours, especially over time, we tend to develop different arches, all of us. So it's not always the perfect movement when you hit the ground and then you go through that to push off. It's important that you make sure that you wear shoes the majority of the time. If you are suffering with any type of leg pain, ankle pain, back pain, it's important that you wear shoes all the time, and not just any shoe, a supportive sneaker, something that's going to allow your foot motion to be controlled and the amount of force going through your foot to be absorbed. If you or someone you know is suffering with foot pain, ankle pain, hip pain, knee pain, and wants a free consultation with a doctor of physical therapy, all you have to do is call our office at 215-997-9898, and we'd be happy to get you in. Thanks, and have a good day.